Have things changed? Well, Jonathan Papelbon, as much as people want to say that his comments at the All-Star break didn't affect his trade value, I think they certainly did. I think it made it easier on other GMs to kind of leverage things in their favor. I just saw a report came out recently, Jason Stark, ESPN, reporting that the three leading suitors for Papelbon's services, the Blue Jays, Cubs, and Dodgers, are no longer in on him because of different reasons. On the Cole Hamels trade front, I don't think the two recent poor starts he's made have affected his trade value. It's just such a tricky situation with this front office dynamic that I don't know if the Phillies are going to be able to work through by July 31st. I mean, it's just 9 days away at this point.
Yeah, I want to start. I want to ask you this question first, Corey. If the Phillies end the year with Hamels, is that a failure?
If you asked me in April, I would have said absolutely yes. But at this point, I can't say yes because, if they do hold on to Hamels for the second half, it's going to be unfortunate for him. He's going to be, apathetic, and the Phillies obviously are not going to have much of a chance to do much better in the second half than they did in the first half. But, if you hold on to Hamels until the winter meetings, for example, you can try to sell him off to 29 other teams as opposed to 3 or 4. At the winter meetings, everybody has hope, everybody has faith, everybody thinks that they can put together a contending club for the next season. I mean, just look at the Padres and the White Sox this past winter with all the moves they made. And also, Hamels will be owed less money. Now, obviously, the inherent risk in holding on to Hamels is that he gets hurt or he just has a poor second half, which hurts his trade value. I mean, last year, you remember the Phillies had all these moves they were thinking about making. They didn't pull the trigger on a single trade, and literally that night, 2 hours after the trade deadline, Cliff Lee went down with an elbow injury, which has devastated this franchise. I mean, you thought you were probably going to get a couple decent prospects back for Cliff Lee, and instead you paid him $37.5 million these last 2 seasons for nothing.
Yeah, and that's something that, it seems to be a theme here because of Papelbon, one of the reasons, maybe his mouth, but also that vesting option that teams just seem like they don't want to deal with. And it seems like, one of the tweets from Jason Stark was that the Phillies still want to make yesteryear-type moves, and those moves don't exist. And you wonder if they're just going to get stuck with 2 guys sitting in their lap because they aren't willing to budge on their stance.
Yeah, I don't know who it was that said that. I think it was an anonymous executive who said the Phillies are looking for yesteryear's deals. But, I mean, that guy's not right because last year the Cubs got an incredible package in return for Jeff Samardzija, who's a much lesser pitcher than Cole Hamels. It only takes one team. You got to look at it on a case-by-case basis. And, I think that around the league, Ruben Amaro has probably been a little bit harshly criticized, a little bit unfairly criticized by other GMs just based on what he's asking for a pitcher who doesn't come up as being available too often. I mean, I can't ever remember a situation like this where a player with so much left on his contract and a player who was still so productive was out there for so long and nobody bit. I don't think that he's been unreasonable with his requests. And real quick, going back to the Jonathan Papelbon vesting option you just mentioned, I think that's also kind of overblown as well. He is going to be owed $13 million next year, whether it is based on the option kicking in with 17 more games finished or Papelbon requiring a trading team to pick that up. But, the Phillies are willing to kick in money on that deal. So financially, I think it's not a huge hindrance. I just think it's one of the factors that other executives are using to try to get the Phillies to bite on a lesser package and maybe just take salary relief as opposed to a package of prospects.
Yeah, Corey Seidman's with us, CSNPhilly.com. Another interesting tweet, I guess, from Jason Stark that he tweeted was an executive who had dealt with Gillick and McPhail said there's no way Pat is going to answer to Andy on this one. Could that be bad? I mean, is that him getting off on a bad foot, having really no say and having to, if Pat Gillick says we're doing this deal whether you want to or not?
No, I don't think so. I mean, unless Andy McPhail really strongly feels that a deal is not in Philly's best interest, I don't think it's going to create too much of a drama-filled situation. Andy McPhail was away from the game for 3 years, and he said in his introductory press conference that a lot of the rules had changed since he left, like the rules with international free agent signings, the rules of draft pick compensation for players who were traded and not brought back. The game's changed a lot since he's been here, and even if he was paying close attention to the league, as a dilettante, as a fan, he wasn't up up on the prospects on each organization the way that Ruben Amaro Jr. hopefully and Pat Gillick hopefully have been eyeing other organizations. So, that makes sense to me. Pat Gillick should want to call the shots. He should want to make this trade as long as the right offer materializes.
A lot of people with Hamels, he does have the no-trade clause, would say that he would not go to Houston. Do you get a sense that Hamels is so frustrated here that it doesn't matter where he goes as long as they have a winning record and a legit chance to make the playoffs?
I thought about this. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. Someone asked me the exact same question about the Astros. That, the Astros, when Cole Hamels put them on the no-trade list, it was because they were an 100-loss team, and now obviously they're not. They're one of the top teams in the American League, and they have a very bright future. So on the one hand, if the Phillies come to Hamels with some kind of Houston offer and say, look, we've struck a deal with the Astros, are you willing to waive the no-trade clause? Hamels is going to be faced with a decision there where he says, I'm either going to take the chance that the Astros are going to be a winning organization moving forward, or I'm going to stay in this stagnant, losing organization in Philly. Now, the flip side is Hamels could block it, which would then force the Phillies to go to the winter meetings and try to shop him because, I do think that Hamels would strongly, strongly prefer to go to the Dodgers. If there's any team that he wants to go to, it's probably the Dodgers. It's, Southern California is where he's from. He knows that team is going to spend. He knows they have a lot of talent. They have Jimmy Rollins. But no, I really do think when push comes to shove, if the Phillies came to Hamels on July 31st and said, look, there's only one team that we struck a deal with, and it's the Astros, I think he would go to Houston.
At this point, do you think the Phillies wait to the bitter end, or does he get traded before next Friday?
I think they wait till the bitter end because they really don't have a choice. There are so many top pitchers that figure to be available ahead of the deadline that there's going to be teams that aren't, it's going to come right down to the wire where teams have to finalize their offers, make their best offers, and really make their decision. Because right now, a team like the Astros or a team like the Dodgers might be more interested in David Price or Johnny Cueto, a rental. But if it turns out for those teams that it's going to cost them a lot in prospects to get Price or Cueto, then they might go back to the drawing board and think to themselves, you know what, if we're going to give up a lot of prospects, we might as well do it for the guy who we have under control as opposed to a half-year player. So I do think that it's going to go right down to that July 31st, 4 p.m. or 3 p.m., whatever time the deadline is. I wouldn't be shocked if that major move for the Phillies is announced minutes after the deadline.
Same story with Papelbon. I mean, I would assume the Phillies are trying to push the foot on the gas to get him out of here, but do you think it comes down to the end for him as well?
No, not necessarily. I think that if the Phillies find anything close to what they're looking for Papelbon, they'll pull the trigger and just rid themselves of this headache.
What's close for him? I mean, is it just get him out of here? Do they have to get something? What is the temperature of what they need to get for Papelbon?
Well, it's a really interesting situation because the Phillies for a long time were justified in asking for a legitimate prospect for Jonathan Papelbon because he's been one of the game's best closers since he signed with the Phillies. I mean, you look at his ERA, it's lower with the Phillies than it was with the Red Sox. He's 16 for 16 this year, ERA in the mid-ones. However, each time he's opened his mouth and talked about how much he wants to be traded, it has hurt his trade value because these teams realize that if he's here on August 1st, he's going to be an extremely unhappy camper. It might not even be a salvageable situation. So at this point, I think that, say the Phillies were looking for like one A-list prospect, now they have to be looking for like a B-plus list prospect just because Papelbon has probably talked his way into other teams' advantages.
Let's take a look at some of the other things that are going on. First off, Nola last night, obviously he pitched very well, and we've been waiting for him to come up. I don't think people should think this is a number one ace, but at least he proved somewhat he belonged last night. He was very poised. He's been very professional in all of his interviews leading up. I mean, I hope he's not Pat Combs where he comes up and goes 4-0 and then just disappears, but he seems like he has the right makeup to make it at this level.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, a lot of people, there's conflicting opinions. Some people think he can be a number one or a number two. Some people think he's a mid-rotation guy. My response is, what is an ace? I mean, Jordan Zimmerman of the Nationals, you consider him an ace? He's a guy who isn't the ace of his own staff, but year after year makes 32 starts, has an ERA right around 3, has about a strikeout per inning, the walks are low, but he doesn't have a dominant fastball. He can get to 95, but he mostly sits 92, 93. That's what Aaron Nola is going to do as well. He had a couple 94s last night, but mostly sat 91, 92. What I did like to see, to me, the best sequence of the night was the first inning. Aaron Nola, after allowing the leadoff double, had Evan Longoria up with the runner in scoring position. He blew a 94-mile-per-hour high fastball by him, blew another fastball by him, and then threw a curveball that Longoria flailed at, took his head off. He looked silly swinging at it. So that right there showed me that Aaron Nola can match up with the best big league hitters that there are. And, moving forward, I see him as a very good pitcher. Whether he turns into a number one dominant ace like a Sonny Gray or a David Price or whoever you want to name, I don't know, but he's going to be a very valuable pitcher moving forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, Corey, when people think of an ace, it's stuff. Do they have that overpowering fastball? But there has been plenty of guys, Greg Maddux comes to mind, that didn't have this overpowering ace-like stuff, but I think a lot of people would take a Maddux at the top of their rotation, and a lot of people, maybe prematurely, are kind of saying that Nola might be more of down that road where he's not overpowering you but can just paint the corners.
Yeah, what I will say is that the guys who are always overrated coming up are the pitchers who throw 97, 98, 99, and the guys who are always underrated coming up are the guys like Nola who rely on command. We're
enamored by them a lot of times, by just their arms, the power arms. For some reason, we love them. And you see a guy like Strasburg can't get on the bump every fifth day. We're talking with Corey Seidman, CSNPhilly.com. Franco obviously is one piece up here. I want to get your thoughts on some of the other pieces. A guy like Hernandez, Herrera. Let's start with Herrera. What is his long-term here in Philly? Is he a center fielder? Do they play him at second down the road? What are the thoughts on Herrera?
Well, he's been a mixed bag this year. He leads the team in doubles, and he looked good swinging early in the season. He's hit a little bit better lately too, but he makes a lot of rookie mistakes. He does not look like a comfortable center fielder all the time. I mean, last night he made another base running blunder, not running out a ground ball to first base, which allowed him to get doubled up, which should never happen. I kind of look at Odubel Herrera as a fourth outfielder. I mean, the next time the Phillies are a competitive, contending team, I really can't see any way that he's the starting center fielder unless he just really, really progresses and develops. I mean, we do have to realize this is the first year that he's been above Double-A. But I don't think Odubel Herrera is a real difference maker moving forward.
How about Hernandez? I know he's been given some extended time. He got off to a great start. They had him hitting third in the lineup the other night. But do you legitimately see him as the second baseman in 2018 when maybe this thing turns around?
Well, I think it's going to be either him or Freddie Galvis. I think that's kind of the beauty of what the Phillies have right now with this kind of abundance of middle infielders. You figure that J.P. Crawford's going to be batting first or second, playing shortstop for the Phillies by then, and that means that either Freddie Galvis or Cesar Hernandez is going to probably be the everyday second baseman. So the Phillies are hoping that one of them sticks. I do think that between Hernandez and Galvis, one of them will be a pretty good second baseman. The fact that they're both good defenders, solid base runners, can slap the ball around, have good plate discipline. They're not going to be more than number 7 or number 8 hole hitters in a National League lineup, but that doesn't mean they can't be, a valuable replacement level, not a replacement level, but a valuable, decent major league player.
Ben Revere, is he kind of a conundrum for this team? Young, can get on base, but he just seems like he's out of place here for some reason.
He does. I mean, I've always said that Ben Revere is the kind of guy who needs to play for a contending team because when he's on a losing team, all the bad things he does are magnified. But if he were on a team like the Angels, for example, batting ahead of Mike Trout and Albert Pujols, we'd be seeing him every night on highlights, stealing bases, scoring runs, making defensive plays. But I just don't think he has a long future in this organization only because he's going to go to arbitration the next 2 years. He went this year as well. He made about $4.5 million this year. That's going to probably bump up to like $7 or $8 million next year, maybe $10 million, $11 million the next year. And I don't think the Phillies are the team that can be paying Ben Revere $18 million over the next 2 seasons, not when they are going to be losing 90-plus games again next season.
I can't believe that any team would pay him double-digit $1 million. That's unbelievable where this game has gone as he steps to the plate right now, by the way. How about Dom Brown? Have they learned enough about him? Is the answer clear that he is not a part of the future?
I don't know how much clearer it could be. I don't know what anybody's really waiting for. Like I heard Larry Anderson last night on radio say that he wasn't really sure, and nobody can really be sure if Dom Brown's ever going to get back to that May 2013 level. But this is as sure as you can be. I mean, the guy has no power. If he was hitting for a little bit of power, maybe this would be different, but still no home runs at the major league level. I think he hit 1 in his 50-plus games at AAA when he was working his way toward the majors again this season. He just doesn't do anything really well. He's not a strong defender. He's not a plus base runner. He doesn't give you a high batting average or a high on base percentage. And the fact that the power is completely gone too, he's no longer a piece of the future. He's a non-tender candidate, really, at the end of the year, because I don't think the Phillies are going to want to pay him, $5 million or whatever it's going to cost when he goes to arbitration again next year. But it's just kind of crazy because, yesterday someone sent me a link to a Baseball America prospect list from, I think it was like 2010, and Dominic Brown was number 1 and Mike Trout was number 2. It's crazy to think of how things have flip-flopped.
No doubt, not even flip-flop, just plummeted for one, and the other skyrockets. I see, as you mentioned, second base, shortstop, and third base with some pieces. Other than that, this seems like a organization that needs just about everything. They moved Tommy Joseph to first base. Do they have any hope for him, or is he just they need a position, they don't want to catch him, or do they think that he could be a first baseman down the road and hit, with some power?
Well, it's wait-and-see mode right now. When he does start playing every day, see if he has the offensive skills they always believed he had. I mean, when he came over from the Giants, I think he was coming off a 20-home-run season, which obviously in the minors looks a lot more impressive from a catcher than it does a first baseman. But I think the hope is that with Joseph not having to worry about calling the game, with him not having to worry about his health behind the plate, that his offensive skills are going to be unlocked, that the potential is going to return, and that he can kind of make up for all that lost developmental time. But I mean, I'm not holding my breath on Tommy Joseph ever being a difference-making piece, and that's really, like, to me, that's the main reason the Phillies have just gone so wrong. Is that, like, if you look back to all the major trades, the Pence deal, the Cliff Lee trade, the Roy Halladay, the Phillies didn't give up a ton to get a lot of the veterans that they got, but they got literally nothing back that they could have used, whether it was Philippe Aumont or Tommy Joseph or Tyson Gillies or whoever. They just have not been able to use any of those players to supplement this aging core.
You're right. I mean, it has been bleak, all of those. And that's why I think, Corey, look, as much as we bang on Ruben, some of the deals he has done a decent job on, the Rollins deal more recently. But when he has been asked to trade the established players for the young players, that's where he seems to have failed, and restocking has really hurt this team. You can trade the big-name players or trade for the big-name players. He seems like he can do that. He did a good job with some of these more recent teams, but when he trades the established players for the younger players, that's where he's been just taken to school, and it's really hurt this team.
Yeah, and that's why it's no coincidence that Hamels has been held on to so long. There was the report, I think it was in something Jason Stark wrote today or yesterday, that another executive reiterating that last winter Amaro said he needed to quote-unquote win any Cole Hamels deal. And he should feel like that because he's gotten taken to the cleaners on every other deal he's made for a high-priced veteran. So this one is going to define his legacy, and he needs to get at least 90 cents on the dollar for Hamels.
No doubt. Good stuff from Corey Seidman, CSNPhilly.com. More on the Phillies as the trade deadline. The last year was a dud. Would a dud be an absolute disaster for them this year?
Yeah, it would, because, if nobody's dealt, it's just going to be more of the same fan disinterest second half, more of the same fan mistrust of the front office. So even if the only move is shedding Papelbon's salary or trading Ben Revere to an AL West team, I think the Phillies just need to pull the trigger to kind of get this rebuild a little bit further along the road.
Well, it did show that your network last night had record ratings. I mean, the number one, show last night for the Money Demos, it showed that the people were starving to see something new and different. And finally, the page flipped over for the first time in a long time last night with Nola pitching. So that was good to see that there is still interest, but you got to give the people something to cheer about, and that hasn't been the case for much of this year or the 3 years previous.
No, and, Aaron Nola's probably going to make about 9 more starts, and I would figure that the ratings are going to be sky high for those 9 remaining starts. The problem is there's not another player that can bring up to, further that excitement. Jason Crawford's not going to be up here this year, so, the next noteworthy call-up might be Jesse Biddle in September. Yeah,
well, we'll see what the September call-ups look like after the trade deadline, because I'm sure that will be the next thing to watch for this team, which is just in the middle of a terrible season, although they played all right out of the break here. And by the way, do you think Pete Mackanin has any shot to keep this job?
No, zero. That's nothing against Pete. He's a really good guy, and he's so much more interesting to talk to than Ryan Sandberg ever was. But Pete Mackanin he's just an interim manager. He's done it 3 different organizations, and the Phillies gave him that job because they knew that he was going to be able to step in and do it and not have any expectations of holding that position moving forward.
Good stuff, Corey, as always. CSNPhilly.com for more on the Phillies from Corey Seidman and the guys. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, man. Talk to you soon.